We had a dear friend in the hospital a while back, and thanks to social media, we were able to follow along with the updates online. And I went home for lunch one day, and Amanda said, "Hey, did you hear this has happened? Things aren't looking terribly great." And I hadn't heard that at that point. And so my first response to her was to go, "No, it didn't." And it turns out Amanda had seen a more recent update than I had, and so she was giving me the most up-to-date information. I was working off of old information. And what was really hard for me to process as we kind of worked through, like, hey, that was kind of an unnecessary response, and I really dug my heels in. It was really hard to process through the fact that I was immediately jumping to defend my stance instead of assuming that I could be wrong. Have you ever been in an argument that you realized halfway through that you either misunderstood the other person or that you were wrong? And typically what we'll do is, instead of admitting that and saying, "Hey, I learned some new information and I really appreciate you sharing that with me," typically what we'll do is we'll dig our heels in further to say, "Hey, this is really embarrassing, and so I don't want to have to admit that," and so we don't. And here's what's so difficult for us about how our opinions interact with reality and then everyone else's opinions. The opinions you hold, the things you believe, you wouldn't believe them unless you thought they were right. You wouldn't believe something that you think is false. See, we have this confirmation bias for our opinions because we think, well, I think it, so it must be right. Now, I'm not talking about the things that make us distinct in our faith as Jesus followers. I'm not saying we shouldn't hold up the truth of the resurrection as our ultimate joy and hope. I do think that when it comes to other areas of our lives, and as Jesus followers, we have a responsibility to conduct ourselves in such a way that proclaims the beauty of Jesus in how we respond to the people we disagree with. This idea that we're uncomfortable and we dig our heels in for being wrong isn't a new problem for humanity. See, the original sin in the garden was mankind thinking that we knew better than someone else. See, God had given mankind direction, and then we made an active and willful decision to disobey because we thought, well, that can't be true, can it? This sin of digging our heels in and thinking our way is the right way is rooted in our fallen nature. It's a part of our brokenness to think and say and believe those things. And what absolutely breaks my heart, and I mourn this, is when I look around our world today, I see people who refuse to see other sides. Not even that they refuse to believe or take on the opinion, but they refuse to see other sides. We have people who are so deeply ingrained in how they think that they immediately become hostile to anyone who thinks differently. And I'm looking around wondering, when did stubbornness become a badge of honor for us? Because I truly believe that as we look in Scripture, it's contrary to the gospel. Proverbs 18:2 says, "A fool takes no pleasure in understanding, but only in expressing his opinion." And I think if you and I took some time to self-reflect, I think we'd tend to notice that we're less concerned with practicing empathy and practicing understanding and humility and grace, and far more concerned with letting people know the things that we believe, and maybe even letting them know how unwilling you are to change your opinions. See, I think it's the mark of a growing and maturing follower of Jesus to possess the ability to connect with others in the middle of differences. And as I thought about it, I said, this is the gospel. Think about how God interacted with humanity. See, we were alienated from God, hostile in mind, doing evil deeds. Colossians tells us that. And we were unable to reconnect this divide on our own. And it took Jesus taking on humanity in order to reconnect us. Hebrews says that we have a high priest who is able to sympathize with our weakness. Jesus stepped into the camp that was in direct opposition to him in order that he could see and experience the brokenness of the world in order to fix what was broken. Jesus put himself in our shoes so that we could experience life, hope, redemption, and reconciliation. So it's in the same way that we can act out the gospel in this. When our opinions diverge or to have a difference from someone else, we can extend grace. We can remain teachable, being willing to step into the shoes and life of someone else. We can stay humble, trying to genuinely understand the viewpoint of others. See, it's by doing this that we point others towards the life, hope, redemption, reconciliation that Jesus came to provide. To say, hey, we're in different camps right now. I understand that I don't see eye to eye with you, but I'm going to do my best to humble myself and choose to connect with you to try and understand what you're saying instead of just worrying about being heard. When's the last time in your conversations with someone that you disagreed with that you used the phrases, "This is new information to me," or "Thank you for teaching me that," instead of reacting defensively and just trying to shove your point of view down someone's throat? What if when interacting with the world, we chose to lead with grace and humility instead of arrogance and stubbornness? Ephesians 2 tells us that Jesus himself is our peace. And he has made us both one and has broken down in his flesh the dividing wall of hostility. Now, more than ever, our world needs hope, not hostility. Jesus came to tear down the walls that divide us. Stop putting them